Heavenly Father, today we put on the full armor to protect us against attack. We put on the belt of truth to protect against lies and deception. We put on the breastplate of righteousness to protect our hearts from the temptations. We put the gospel of peace on our feet to walk in your light, peace, and freedom with the Holy Spirit. We rebuke anxious thoughts. We take up your shield of faith for protection to block and destroy all the darts and threats thrown at us by the enemy. We put on the helmet of salvation to cover our minds and thoughts, reminding us that we are children of a mighty King. We are forgiven, set free, saved by the blood of Jesus. We take up the sword of the Spirit, your living word, that has the power to demolish strongholds and is sharper than any double-edged sword. We come to you, Lord, in prayer daily. In Jesus' mighty name we pray. Amen.
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 What's up, you guys? Welcome to The Imagination. I'm your host, Emma, and today I'm absolutely honored to have back on the show for an incredible joint episode MK Ultra, ritual abuse, and organized abuse survivors, overcomers, thrivers, and badasses, survivor and anti-child trafficking advocates, public whistleblowers, podcasters, and two of my favorite humans in the entire world, Dr. Juliette Engel and Lynn Scott Haggerman. A little bit about both ladies if you have not listened to their past episodes. Born into worlds tainted by institutional betrayal, Juliette and Lynne endured the unspeakable. Yet from the ashes of their pain rose warriors of light whose testimonies echo like thunder and whose advocacy work has helped and liberated thousands. Their stories are not just simply accounts of survival. They are anthems of reclamation, proving that the human spirit, once ignited, can dismantle empires of darkness. Juliette, born into CIA and NSA-connected parents, endured things like electroshock, LSD, and sex magic rituals in facilities tied to Disney and Stanford. Escaping at 16, she became a radiologist, founded the MiraMed Institute, and launched the Angel Coalition, rescuing thousands from trafficking while exposing elite cover-ups, described in her memoir, Sparky, Surviving Sex Magick. And beautiful Lynne, trafficked from birth to age 5, survived medical torture, satanic rituals, and university tunnels, was trafficked by her own family to neighborhood perpetrators, and horrific child auctions. Guided by faith, she built a career as an HR consultant and marathoner, founding QGRIT to heal survivors through her podcast and wellness advocacy, amplifying truths about organized child abuse and elite networks. Juliette and Lynne's testimonies converge like rivers into a storm-swept sea. Both women, as infants, thrust into CIA-sponsored child slavery, navigated underground facilities rife with ritual abuse and mind control. Universities, which should serve as safe spaces for all, served as above-ground facades for below-ground atrocities, from electroshock and drug-induced fragmentation to exploitation by pedophilic perpetrators in government and entertainment. Juliette's Sex Magick programming parallels Lynne's adrenochrome rituals, both rooted in MK Ultra's goal of creating programmable mind control slaves through trauma. And in their escapes, Juliette's bold teenage rebellion, Lynne's faith-fueled breakthrough, they reclaimed narratives long scripted by shadowy handlers, turning suppressed screams into public indictments that challenged the 1975 Church Committee revelations and demand deeper accountability. If you've missed any of Juliette's or Lynne's episodes on this channel, I highly suggest and encourage you listen to their other episodes when you get a chance, and I will have their playlist in the show notes down below for you guys. On today's episode, they are going to be discussing a few very important topics that truly need greater societal understanding and a call to action, including a discussion around Manchurian candidates, how these MK Ultra mind control slaves can be programmed to carry out heinous crimes on the government's behalf, including things like political assassinations and mass shootings, the trans agenda and its relationship to MK Ultra, and the horrific news headlines that bombard us daily, and so much more. Juliette and Lynne stand as twin pillars in the pantheon of resilience, their lives a testament that MK Ultra's architects could shatter bodies but never souls. From trafficked children to trailblazing advocates, they embody the radical act of testimony, naming the evil, healing the wounded, and igniting the next generation. Their similarities, endured in ritual-draped tunnels, voiced in unfiltered truth, and transmuted into rescue and reform, remind us that adversity is not the end, but the forge of destiny. In a world still grappling with hidden predators, their work whispers a universal rallying cry: rise, reclaim, and radiate. For in their unbreakable spirits, we see the dawn of justice, not just as a distant hope, but as the spark within us all, ready to burn away the dark. So, you guys, without further ado, please help me in welcoming back today's guests of honor: Voices for the Voiceless, Walking Miracles, Women of God, anti-child abuse and survivor advocates, my dear friends, and two women and heroes fearlessly breaking ground in disclosure to put an end to government-sanctioned child slavery and organized child abuse once and for all. The one, the only, Dr. Juliette Engel and Lynne Scott Haggerman. Ladies, welcome. It is so wonderful to have you on. Thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you, Emma. I love your introductions.
I love your introductions too. No one gives an introduction like you do, Emma. You are such a warrior for all of us.
Mm-hmm.
I love you guys so much, and it's an honor to get to be here in any way to help. And I'm just so inspired by all the trailblazing you guys are doing, all the podcasts and advocacy, and you guys are really together and apart making waves for change. And I love seeing you guys go on podcasts together and advocating together and working together. So I'm actually really excited to bring you both on together because people might not know this, but I actually met Lynne through Juliette. And they're dear friends off screen, and they've known each other for a while, and they've been working together behind the scenes on a lot of things and doing podcasts together. So it's really neat to have you both on. I know we've brought Kathy on with Juliette before, who's also a dear friend of both of them. So I'm really excited to talk about these hard topics today because I think it's really relevant. There's a lot going on in the news that's really traumatizing, and we see how these events that we're going to reference today, things like Charlie Kirk's assassination, the Ukrainian woman who died on the train, and we can even look back on history, the JFK assassination, the George Floyd scandal, and assassination. They tend to do these throughout time to where there's these really traumatizing things that are replayed over and over again that we actually see on live TV. And it creates this sort of ripple effect that can be good. You see some people getting inspired to change in a good way, but you also see these radicalizations of hate. And then on top of that, you see people just, they go offline because they're so traumatized, and now they're hurting inside, they're dealing with PTSD from what they saw, and they just don't know how to navigate this world. And I think, it's always tragic whenever somebody gets assassinated or passed away, especially when it's such a public and, beloved figure, or the stranger that was minding her own business on the train that nobody even knew her name. It's all really, really sad, but at the same time, we have to understand the mechanisms that go behind some of these things, because there's a level of engineering and manufacturing sometimes, not in every case possibly, but a lot of the things that we see on the news, sadly, there's a nefarious agenda behind it, and evil forces, and innocent people being used to do heinous things, and then the public points a finger at them and wants to persecute them. When you look at stories like what you two went through, and we see how controlled somebody can be through these different programming methods, through things like MK Ultra, the things that you can force somebody to do against their will without them even having an awareness of it. And I think it's just a really important topic that we have. So I want to turn it over to you ladies to sort of start this conversation. And obviously talking about the trans agenda, they're always pushing that within these stories, especially lately, and kind of tying it all into what it is, these kind of manufactured, engineered scenarios, and really shine a light on some of the innocent lives potentially behind it that are being destroyed, once again, because our government are cowards and can't do these things themselves. So they raise children, program them to do these really horrible things for them. So I'll turn it over to you ladies.
Well, thank you so much. I'll jump into the trans agenda because that one hit me first. And what I want to start out with is, based upon my childhood with the underground experimentation in the labs under the U.S. University Medical Center, our U.S. universities may be on U.S. soil, but they are not We the People facilities. They have long been corrupted way back when through Operation Paperclip when the Nazis were imported and put in all of our systems, including the universities. So now we're into third generation. When I was little, I was experimented on. I saw other children experimented on and physically and mentally tortured and traumatized, live organ harvesting, adrenochrome harvesting. That was below ground. Now they're above ground. So the trans agenda, where they mutilate our children and call that normal, is one big experimentation, is what they've been doing all along. It is still part of the Hitler-Heimler research, and Hitler and Heimler were both occultists in their practices. So when it comes to the trans, how it works today, as well as the lies and deceit, and how it works today is there is so much infiltration in the Department of Re-education to try to confuse children about whether they are boys or girls. And then when they express that confusion at home and the parents are concerned, rather than seeking God and his will, they look outside themselves to the white coats, thinking they have authority. The white coats will say, if Johnny wants to become Jill, you better do it, or Johnny will commit suicide. Concern-loving parents don't know what else to do because they haven't turned to the Lord, I believe. Follow the white coat, where then they start mutilating their children physically, and they start giving them the SSRIs. SSRIs, RFK Jr. was just speaking a week ago to read the black box, which says this will cause suicide and homicidal behaviors. So what our unhealthcare systems are saying, and that's who experimented on me and all the other children and continue to do so, what they tell the parents then is, switch Johnny to Jill or he'll be suicidal, and let me give you this big pharma medicine, which is another reason I was experimenting on as a little girl, was to develop this. And they give the big pharma medicine, which will not only make them suicidal, but homicidal. So it is a corrupt system from top to bottom, and nothing but lies from the enemy.
Yeah, I was born in 1949. The CIA was founded in 1947. So this whole monstrosity is only 2 years older than I am. You know, we feel like it's been our history since back to the beginning of time. It hasn't. It's a fairly new phenomenon. And what happened with the MK Ultras, you had probably 12, a total of 12 evil men in Nuremberg, 5 of whom were my relatives, who were all fluent German speakers who were there for the Nuremberg trials. And they weren't there to hang the Nazi scientists who were doing horrific, unforgivable experiments on all kinds of children, whoever, Russian, German, Jewish, whoever they had in their hands. And that included the changing genders, changing chimeric experiments, creating human animals, and then also what they called cybernetics at the time, which was creating robots, human robots, which would be implanting devices in people's heads. This is before internet, of course. So you had the Nazi scientists there in Nuremberg who really didn't want to die. You had the CIA specialists who included my uncles, who were just so thrilled to meet these scientists and get a hold of all their research, because they got a hold of all the results from the Nazi concentration camps, and they didn't want to waste it. And they saw a huge opportunity to create power for themselves. And at that time, when they brought the scientists over, the CIA was only 3 years old. So it was a small club of people. And I know from my own family that they were sexually ambiguous. So the whole gay agenda, they were all men. But from what I know, they were largely gay men. And so the German scientists that they brought over would happily have supported any agenda they wanted to put forward. So basically, they brought them all over to Huntsville, Alabama, processed who was who, turned about 1,500 of them loose inside the United States with new identities and put them in labs, put them in what I call annexes, what the CIA call safe houses. It took them a few years to build these safe houses, which included floors of hospitals and renting buildings at religious retreats. I mean, lots of times the people that owned these buildings and retreats didn't even know what was going on there. They just got a huge influx of money. They had to let the CIA use one of the floors and they not ask any questions. So it grew very fast. And the key was you had 12 evil men, 1,500 Nazi scientists, 100 years of Nazi research, because they'd been researching the occult, they'd been researching everything that had to do with control of populations, and they were particularly interested in the power of evil and in anything that would give them connections and powers to demons and Satan. There's no question of that. They still have all this research. We've never seen it, and well, saw some of it in the program, and so it's I guess it's important for me to talk about that, because as one of the first ones into the program, because the MK Ultra program started in 1953, I was in it in 1955. All the Dr. Greens who ran the annexes had German accents, wore the white coats, and the children were cared for by men who looked like women. At least I think that's what they were, who wore long black dresses and were called nanny blacks. And so it was a small seed from which all this grew. And I think to eradicate it, you have to go back and destroy the seed. And to say that their entire goal was to make you do what you wouldn't want to do or wouldn't ordinarily do. So every time I hear a congressman or someone say about a shooter or a programmed person that you can't be forced to do something that you wouldn't ordinarily do, that's completely untrue, because you had the whole force of the Nazi intelligence research plus the CIA plus the funding that went from MK Ultra through the CIA to MK Ultra, which was by their own admission unlimited, to produce the Manchurian candidates, the people who could be controlled and forced to do something they wouldn't ordinarily do for any reason. And I think changing genders is one of those things. I think that murder is another thing. I think that the killing of babies is another thing. I think that a lot of abortion is done by people who wouldn't ordinarily do such a thing. So I'm the oldie of the group, and so I yield back to Lynn on the more recent. But I think that you're not looking at a left-right paradigm. You're looking at the impact of 12 evil men from 1949 who set out to create this monster that we now have, which resulted in the pandemic and the fact that people would just do what people in white coats told them to do. I mean, that's right out of MK Ultra. Being forced to listen to white coats. You can put on a white coat, doesn't make you a genius. And so here we are. Now we need the spiritual connections, because we need to get outside of the programming and liberate ourselves from outside of ourselves. And we can do that with God's help. So am I making sense, Lynn?
Yes, it makes perfect sense. So I'll build on your wonderful building blocks. And I have to say, Juliette, I know I say this offline too. Every time we get together, I get another piece of my puzzle. And it's like the dots connect and everything becomes more and more clear. So I'm confident our audience is thinking the same way and feeling the same way, Emma. So to help people understand this MK Ultra thing and to make it realistic to modern viewers, because what we just saw was the trans agenda and the MK Ultra of the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And we're also seeing MK Ultra of these radicalized people who've come out of the woodwork, and they're all ages in all walks of life and all industries that are calling for more assassinations, the assassinations of his children, his wife, other people. And America, we the people, are worldwide too, we the people, more and more people are waking up like, what is happening? Who are these people? These are the people that I go to this hospital and these people work there. I see these doctors and these are their nurses. And I go to school and these are the teachers. And I thought I was safe in a Christian school. And here's a Christian teacher celebrating Charlie Kirk's assassination, showing my son a video. And they're everywhere, judicial system, government. And to help people understand how this can even be, the basics of MK Ultra, some of the basics. The first step is depriving of one of the steps, food, water, sleep. So we have been deprived of food for decades now. Our soil is destroyed. There are no nutrients in our food. GMO food contains Roundup. Everyone knows what that does. Even the organic food isn't exactly organic. So our bodies are starved for food, absolutely starved. The water is poison. So our bodies are starved for water. That's why many, many years ago, people never talked about sucking down as much water a day as they possibly could for health. It's because the water was healthy, and now it's not. And because of all of the worries and stress that's been happening just even the last few years, people are not getting good sleep. They're not, and that's when our bodies repair and heal. So that's the foundation of what starts making this happen. And then there's repeated fear that's done. And the repeated fear, I'll use COVID as an example. COVID was an MK Ultra operation, true and true. And I'm sorry to say, we the people failed that test. I'm confident we won't fail the next one. But when that came out, it was a worldwide coordinated attempt to control the entire population of the world by the handful of Luciferian satanic families at the top. That's of course God's over them. Let's not forget that. But that's who's at the top of the evil, the Luciferian satanic families. And there's not a lot of them, but they control down the line, down to we the people. So when COVID came out, it was well planned, it was well orchestrated. You can see all the videos beforehand of the planning. And they instilled fear. They instilled fear in everyone of death. And that's MK Ultra. When I was little, I was physically and mentally tortured, where it was instilled in you this fear of death. And I knew they could do it because I saw them kill other children and people and animals. So during COVID, we watched them kill grandma in the nursing home. And they called it COVID, but it was a pre-planned, predetermined bioweapon release. And they started killing people, some real, some not, saying the hospitals were full of people that were dying. A lot of that was not true. Some of it was. Some of it they intentionally happened with remdesivir, for example. And that instilled fear in people. And because of that fear and the mantra on mainstream media, the mantra, you're going to kill grandma if you don't, the vaccine was the ultimate, you're going to kill grandpa. And so then what people started doing was they started injecting themselves with a bioweapon where the insert to that weapon was completely blank. And they were forcing their other family members to take it because everybody was so afraid of death. I mean, things so much worse than death. And heaven's a marvelous place. But people were so afraid. And then they started putting toilet paper over their face and pretending that was going to stop the worst event in modern. So all these things that happened that was an MK Ultra operation. So when you think of the trans shooter, that generation that we have in the universities now, they went through COVID. They went through, most of them did not have a high school graduation because of this horrific, horrible, fear-based COVID agenda. Then they go into and they've been taught and indoctrinated forever that there are confusion, 72 different ways to be. Then they hit the universities where there's MK Ultra programming happening, and now we have the trans shooters. So that's MK Ultra. We've lived it.
Absolutely. If I could just add a couple things too from hearing so many testimonies, just to shine a light and validate what you're saying. I've had, I can think of three sort of separate instances where I've heard gender confusion and the trans conversation come up in testimonies. The first being as a very small child, for example, I've had many women testify, show me photos of them as a child, and their parents perfectly, uh, purposely dressed them up in a more male type garb, and then would cut their hair really short, which was probably very confusing for them going to school and being amongst very girly girls. And then they're, have these little butch haircuts. They're dressed sort of like a boy, but they're being told that they're a girl. I've also heard survivors testify that because they were either abused by the same sex or opposite sex, it confused them and they grew up not knowing what they were attracted to. And some people that were abused by the same sex grew up, feeling like they were attracted to that and had to go through some therapy and figured out that they weren't actually, it was an effect of abuse, but that it really confused who they were and that they felt, very confused about their sexual attractions as well as, who they were as a person. And then the third being, I've had multiple survivors come on and say that as adults, dealing with trauma before after memories, typically before, they felt so sort of disconnected from their gender and felt like they're because they were a male or female, that was the cause of why they were hurt so many times, and so purposely went to the other gender, became a male or a female, the opposite of what they were, to sort of shed their skin and get out of it because they felt, their unconscious mind was basically like, well, if you weren't a girl, you wouldn't be abused. If you were a boy, none of this would ever happen to you. So they started taking hormones, transferred, did all the things, cut their hair, started wearing clothes like boys, and then had to go through a lot of therapy to be like, oh, I wasn't healed from my abuse and thought this was the way to get out of it, when in fact, I just had to heal what I went through, and I'm actually perfectly happy being a female. I don't want to be male. I just felt like it was the quickest way to sort of get abusers away from me. And I've heard that also from men that, became a trans woman or trans man. I don't know all the terminology. I'm sorry, you guys. But I've had men also testify that they went through stages where they wanted to become a woman and went through that and went into drag or just started dressing like a woman because they felt like if they were a woman, they wouldn't have been violated, or that the abuse would stop. They'd stop hurting. So you see how this is like so ingrained, the gender, the sexuality confusion, and how depending on the upbringing of somebody too, and what they're programmed for, what kind of confusion is done at different ages, how they deal with the trauma later on in life, how all these things can be symptoms of abuse. It's not necessarily something that we can look at in a black and white way, like how a lot of us do, where we judge people. We know a lot of predators hide in the trans community too, and which is really sad because there's actual victims that aren't being helped and who are being gaslit and sort of abused all over again. And then, of course, used in these horrendous circumstances that we see on TV, and so they're kind of like weaponizing MK Ultra against them and then kind of weaponizing it against the public, how you're explaining on a macro level, and mind controlling us in these different ways using the programming that they're doing on these micro levels.
Yeah, and the number of people at this stage who have been through the full MK Ultra program, which includes all the variations, including the like the Child of God and the pseudo religious cults and GATE and other. I mean, there's just a dozen programs, but when you take the numbers and you start adding them up, there's at least 300,000 adult Americans who've been fully MK Ultra'd, who, if they cooperated, if they followed the program and they gave up free will, and I call it giving up your soul, they were rewarded. They became highly successful. So now they're promoted into like the senior executive service, where they run 75 of the government agencies, cannot be fired, cannot be criticized, cannot be evaluated. They're running corporations, they're running government agencies, they're running law enforcement, and taking their orders from someone other than the agency itself and not looking out. after the company, the agency, or the American people. But there they are. So these out of this little seed came the mustard tree, and now the seeds of the mustard tree we're up to third generation. So we have 300,000 originals, and out of that, how many second generation, how many third generation? And the Nazis knew they only had to do this for 100 years. They only had to control or be running the centers for 100 years, and then the program itself would become self-replicating. So we're in a pickle. We've got to, and deprogramming is extremely difficult. So fortunately, I think hundreds of survivors are starting to come forward and are willing to look at the greater effects of the project and how it's going to affect the future of humanity. You know, we're looking at the very survival. I mean, as Lynn said, the air is poison, the water is poison, the food's poison, and children are being poisoned by vaccines and all the medications that they're being given that they shouldn't ever have been given in the first place, and so it's a program. It's a self-destructive program that probably running 200 years will destroy the human race. So we need to be smarter, and we can be. I mean, it's, as Lynn will tell you about fighting demons. These are demons that created this program. These are the demons that with glee got their hands on immoral, inhuman research, which never should have been done and never should have been gifted to these 12 evil men who then got unlimited money and because of their family connections, could reach into every aspect of American society and poison everything. So, but I don't accept that that's the end of us. So, and yeah, you've got the constant visualization of Charlie Kirk's murder and the death of that poor Ukrainian girl constantly. You can't turn on the television or open a internet page without seeing the graphics. So that's the constant fear mongering and intimidation and trauma. So they're traumatizing us over and over and over, getting us ready for the next round.
Yes, and I love your message too, that we don't have to take it because we don't have to take this anymore. We absolutely do not. And a couple things that I've been recommending to people. The first is leave the systems as best as you can, a step at a time, not to get overwhelmed. So, for example, to leave the food system, don't eat processed food, it's chemicals and it's going to kill you. Don't eat GMO food. It's slowly leaving the system. It's getting your water healthy through filtration processes. It's connecting to God and getting your relationship back to God to find the peace and be able to sleep, for example, among many, many other things. It's not feeding the universities, not feeding the indoctrination, not feeding the Department of Re-education, trying to look at non-invasive healing modalities and natural healing modalities as opposed to the unhealthcare system. So a step at a time, try to leave the systems because that's where the MK Ultra is all happening. And we, the people, can do this ourselves. And then the second thing is to realize the power, dominion, and authority we have over these demons. We're at a place in time now where it's a battle against good versus evil. And we pick a side. There's no fence. There's sitting on the fence, doing nothing is a behavior. I teach, so my day job, HR consulting, I teach communication classes all the time. And I'll tell people saying and doing nothing is a behavioral indication of agreement. You may not, but that's the way the human language works. In the spiritual world, it's a contract. And if something is said or done that you disagree with and you don't speak up, in the spirit realm, I know most people can't see the angels and demons like I do, but that's how they get their commands, is by what we say, think, don't say, don't think, and that tells them how to proceed. So We do have power, dominion, and authority over these demons. And I recommend that people take that back. It's something that has been not taught in the church forever because the church has been infiltrated also. It's another system that's been infiltrated. And Jesus gave us the keys to the kingdom of heaven, Matthew 18, Matthew 16. What we allow on earth is allowed by heaven. What we do not allow on earth is not allowed by heaven. So we need to start speaking and doing whatever it is that God's called us to do. And remember Ephesians 6, our battle is not against flesh and blood. It's not against these people. It's the demons. And if you could all see it, I see demons coming out of people's mouths. I see demons whispering in people's ears, and then they speak what the demons say. So we control the demons, and then we control, we have the power, dominion, and authority, not these evil Luciferian Satanists. It's us. We're children of God.
I agree completely. And I hope when we get further into these broadcasts that we can talk about the control of demons and the visualization of demons and communications from demons and some of my experiences with demons, and but that's another world. If we're talking about right here, right now, and today's circumstances, clearly we're being set up for another major psyop, and it's time for all MK Ultra survivors to look at who they are. And I think now's the time to get a hold of the documents that were just released by the National Security Archive in December 23rd, 2024, this huge release of 1,200 documents in which the CIA admit to everything. So it's the beginning of a complete summary of what they did starting in 1947, building up into the 1950s, how they started the program, who started the program, what the objectives of MK Ultra were at that time, how they evolved, what they became. And I think it's very important to realize for everybody right now, for the impact of the COVID PSYOP, that the head of the MK Ultra program was Sidney Gottlieb. And Sidney Gottlieb, during the Second World War and up until he became the head of MK Ultra, was the head of technical services for the OSS, which became the CIA. And he was known as the head poisoner of the CIA. And he worked with Alan Dulles and John Foster Dulles, who were based in Switzerland, to connect with Eli Lilly Company. And Eli Lilly provided the MK Ultra program with unlimited quantities of LSD, and it was in the tons. So they were shipping tons of LSD to different sites around the United States that were then used in experiments at the annexes, which were run by a Dr. Green, who was one of the German scientists, a couple Dr. Whites, who were Americans, who were collaborators in this, the nanny blacks who took care of the children, and whoever else was on staff in the annexes. And one of the main goals of having children and adults on LSD was to develop a tablet form of mind control drug that would make would be taken by the entire American population willingly, and make Americans emotion based in their decision making and make them illogical thinkers. And they did that. That's Prozac. So Prozac and all its derivatives, which is the most widely prescribed drug in the United States, possibly the world. I know the patents won't run out, but there are all kinds of derivatives of Prozac that people are taking. And so there it is. So we've got a nation of Prozac. Also came out of the MK Ultra program. So you've got people thinking emotionally, people reacting emotionally instead of logically, people so people highly susceptible to input, like the input from the from the shocking pictures and the television broadcasts of the trauma and death, and not thinking, why are they doing this? Who's actually putting this up there, and what are they doing this for? Which is what people should be thinking. They're on the Prozac, so their brains are not working, and it's highly addictive. So once you're on that, you don't get off of it. So that's another level. People have to have to get off of these medications. And I recently decaffeinated, getting off of my addiction to massive amounts of coffee during the daytime. And I know how difficult that was. So I mean, Prozac is getting off of a medication that completely disrupts and interferes with your neural networks. It's got to be just a horrendous task. But it needs to be done, or don't start it in the first place.
Absolutely. And kind of another layer to it too. I had a survivor, and I want to ask you about these documents, or both of your personal experiences with this, if you had it in your own story, if you've had survivors testify. Two things. I had a survivor come on and with his wife, and his wife said, years ago, before I knew what had happened to my husband, he started cross-dressing. He would act like a child and go in my closet and wear my clothes. And she's like, it almost caused us a divorce because I didn't know what was happening. And eventually she found out that it was a part, that he was programmed with a child part that was a different sex than what his front personality was, and his physical body that would come forward. And, she didn't know about it. So it was very confusing to her and to him. And then on the other spectrum, when it comes to the assassination parts that we're talking about, I've had survivors, obviously, and it's part of our conversation today, come on and say that was part of what they were being trained for and conditioned for in their own programming, was to be a political assassin for a group or a single person. Do you know, Juliette, in those documents, did it talk about these different programming methods? And then for both of you, did you have any experience seeing that in your own programming with yourself or other children? Or have you heard that from other survivors that was part of their programming?
Oh, it's definitely part of the programming, and that's the dissociative identity. They call it a dissociative identity disorder, but it's not a disorder. It's the programming. So the first thing they do to you as a child, and this, I know this happened to Lynne, it happened to myself, like probably happens even before birth. They traumatize you to the point where you start splitting, and you split into multiple compartments and identities. And I wound up with over 150 different identities in myself. And a lot of them I've never opened or explored, but each one is cut off by complete amnesia. And in those compartments could be assassins, could be poisoners, could be I was in the Sex Magick program, so a lot of my conditioning was inappropriate sexual behavior, which I refused to manifest. But it's placed in there, it's programmed in there, and so yeah, and it'd be interesting to get. There are specialists in dissociative identity disorder, and how that is programmed into the mind, and how that then is activated. There's triggers to each. There's something that opens each one of those boxes, and it may not be known to the person at all. It could be a sound, could be a smell, could be a color, could be a series of words. And then that person is triggered, then that person manifests what comes out of the box. And with that comes the behavior, which could be murder, violence, cross-dressing, whatever it is that was put in there at infancy or early childhood, also comes with a suicide program. So if as soon as the person starts waking up to think, why am I doing this? This makes no sense at all. That the suicide program triggers, and a very high proportion of people then kill themselves out of humiliation, out of shock, out of confusion. But you'll see that as people read through these documents and start recognizing and And Emma, we'll put the link to the documents from the National Security Archive because everyone should look at these. This is the confession. There isn't any excuse for anyone anytime in the future to say MK Ultra didn't happen. And this mind control programs wasn't sponsored by the CIA. You can't deny it anymore. It did happen, and people need to realize that each one of those compartments is guarded by a suicide program, and as you start to remember, you need to be aware that you're setting off triggers you don't even know are there and are extremely dangerous. So I'm sorry, Emma, I might have gone sideways there, but
No, that's
yes,
great. Did they
you.
reference any of that? Was there talk about like assassination programming or anything in those documents at all?
I don't remember if it's specifically. Mostly, it was about. It was more surviving. It was more building the attitudes and the abilities for agents. But a lot of people wrote ancillary parts to it. So as you go through the sourcing, there's multiple references to creating assassins, creating spies, creating prostitutes for the CIA. There's 1,200 documents there. You've got to dig, and then you've got to dig into the references. And there's books and graduate degrees and PhDs that are going to come out of that set of documents, plus more documents coming. So the big takeaway from this batch is that it did happen, just like we all remember.
Well, and it's interesting too because of course I agree with everything you said, Julia, and I adore you. I do. So what's interesting is while people are debating if MK Ultra happened in 1995, our government merged the MK Ultra department with the remote viewing department. So I'm just saying, while everybody debates, is there such a thing? They're merging departments in our government. So in our world, this is all kind of a moot point. But yes, people can do the research themselves because it's definitely out there, as well as Kathy O'Brien, all of our good friend that you mentioned earlier, Emma. I mean, she gave congressional testimony, and people can see that and buy her marvelous books. When it comes to the DID, dissociative identity, I'll use my words for this. I was trafficked and harmed from the time I was born till I was 5 years old, and part of my speaking is from that standpoint. And because I was out of the program, I'm confident I was watched for a long time and still am, I'm sure, from that. But I was officially, my parents divorced. We moved a long way away from where it was happening. And so the bulk of it stopped because I wasn't in the geographical vicinity of everything anymore. Because I was removed at the age of 5, I know that I have, I call them parts. And when we talk about triggers, one thing I want to make sure I say in the time allowed is when people have a trigger, I don't want people to be afraid of that because anyone with any type of trauma will have a trigger. And I'll say it can be a doorknob, it can be someone's voice, like Juliette said, it can be a sense or some of the most triggering things that there are, because that's our strongest sense. But when it happens, God's told me too that it's the mind's way of it's time to remember this thing, whatever's in there that you haven't remembered yet. And as long as we have support systems when this happens, we can, I believe, maintain safety. So for me, my support systems, God's given me different ones over time, but I see a marvelous, spirit-filled, godly trauma therapist who specializes in EMDR, who I've come to trust over the years. And then I have the Lord God Almighty, Jesus Christ, and Holy Spirit to help me. And then I can always reach out to friends if I need to. But what I find is my biggest support is the Trinity and a godly woman to help me process through this trauma. And so because of that, when the triggers hit, and they still hit to this day, and sometimes I can have multiple ones a day, hardly a day goes by where I don't have one, but it is getting better. And when they happen, you that part of you that experienced whatever the trigger is, it's opening up a compartment in the brain where that trauma is. And I love the way that God gives us amnesia so that we can quasi-function in society until it's time to heal. And he's told me that the trigger and the accompanying unusual behavior that's not me is just the body's way of saying it. The mind forgets, the body remembers, it's time to heal. And when this comes out, whatever harmed me in the past starts happening today. And it affects my thoughts, it affects my feelings, it affects my behaviors. But by now I know what it is. And so I can navigate through it and process out that trauma and put it behind me, which is why I can talk like the sane, rational woman that you see today, because I processed out trauma. But what happened whenever I was little, between all of the physical and mental torture that happened to me and that I saw perpetually and continually, every time that happened, a part of me had to emerge that is a good part of me to help me survive. And I survived by letting that part of me come out and handle that trauma while the rest of me could stay safe and hidden. And then once that particular trauma was over, the amnesia came into place, and then I could quasi-function. If that specific trauma ever happened again, that particular part would come out and handle it, so the rest of me could continue to function. And that's how it works. And anyone today who gets a trigger and they find that they're behaving like a child, you were likely had some type of trauma as a child. And whether it was, the extent of hours or not, it's still you had some type of a trauma, because that's not normal adult behavior. And that's just a simple indication that it's time to seek the Lord, is what I would do first, and ask him what he would have you do. And survivors like Juliette and I have I have my website, QGRIT.org. Juliette's got books and her website, and we tell you how we healed. So if it resonates with you, you can move forward with it. And if not, you don't. So do what resonates with you. But Juliette and I sit here before you, sane and rational, because we processed through a lot of this trauma. And I too have many, many parts, and still will find more. But this is how I become healed and whole. This is all of me. It's nothing outside of me. It is a gift from God and a blessing to be able to remember and start becoming who I actually, it explains why I used to do the things that I do that never made sense to me, and allows me to make different choices today that are more healthy.
And so
Yeah, and the younger it happened to you, the more deeply and more fractionated your mind is, so that even though you went until just to the age of 5, you had the maximum
Yes.
compartmentalization and fractionalization, as opposed to someone who starts like in the GATE program in high school. You've already got a solid core, and the boxes form around that. But an infant is easily fractionated, because easily terrified, has no basis for holding on to, and the support system of your parents is non-existent. So and a very cruel thing that they did for the in the MK Ultra program was to separated me from my access to Christianity by forcing me into the Church of Satan and cutting off my ability to even read the Bible. So I'm working on that now. I have a good friend who read me the Bible, and that made all the difference to me. And then giving up myself, giving up my ego, and accepting the Lord. I was able to do that after I understood. I had to grapple with and understand the meaning of grace,
Mm.
which is something that's completely distorted for MK Ultra survivors. The belief that we do not, you have to earn grace, and we will never earn it, as opposed to the Lord gave us grace. and it can't be taken from us. So that and a lot of other distortions of the Bible, which were deliberate and extremely cruel.
I
Yes.
understand that. I had to learn what love was
Mm.
because I was constantly had things done to me and said, I love you. And so whenever I became a Christian and I read that word all over scripture, I thought, no,
Not for me.
not for me. So I had to really, really work on that. And one of the blessings that I had being so little and coming out of it so little was I saw God all the time and Jesus and angels and demons and went to heaven. And that still I live an extremely supernatural lifestyle now with lots of miracles and wonders and manifestations. It's a way of life. And I know that that's available to all children. I believe the Department of Reeducation takes that out of us intentionally, makes us lose our connection with the supernatural and the spiritual. But because I was in it so little and removed from it so little, that has been a huge part. Although when I was 5 and 95% of my memories were wiped that the Lord did, the amnesia, so I could quasi function till I got to a safe place where I could start healing. Part of that wiping was him
Mhm.
and Jesus and Holy Spirit and the angels and the demons in heaven. And I would still see them at times, but it was more few and far between. And I am in uninterrupted connection with God Himself, and I have been since I was little. And that was always true. But when the memories came back of what happened to me, so did the memories of all of the supernatural things. And it helped explain a lot of my life too, all the supernatural things that were constantly happening. And I thought everybody, you know, could hear what animals thought and talk to plants and do telepathy. And I just thought it was like the norm. I didn't see many people do it, so I didn't either. But I think that it is how we're supposed, they don't move their lips in heaven. Just spoiler alert, they don't. So,
Yes. And so we see how through what you guys personally experienced, what you've learned, what you've heard from other testimony, that a lot of the stuff that we see on the news that is so tragic, it's meant to be a weapon against the people watching it, people that didn't grow up in the families that you did. They still want all of us traumatized. And so they have amplified what you guys went through in a way that can affect everybody through propaganda, through what you were saying, Juliette, with repetition. Kathy O'Brien always says repetition is the basis of mind control. It really is. You tell somebody something so many times and it can create a response in them, good or bad. And they obviously want a negative response. They want us in those low frequencies. They want us traumatized watching TV. They want all of us to be MK Ultra to some degree. And then you also see how the programming itself on an individual level that they do to children, things like the trans confusion, the alters, the ways that they abuse kids can create an effect later on in life that is then weaponized against everybody. And then you also see how programming for assassinations, for Manchurian candidates can produce somebody that we see on TV, and again, we're not saying every single person that commits a crime is potentially a victim, but it is certainly something to keep in mind. It's sad that we could be persecuting somebody that went through what you did, and that's being used against their will, how you were saying, to commit something like an assassination on live TV. And we're not holding compassion or we're not outraged for the right reasons sometimes, fighting for that person too that might be going through something really hard. And that's actually a victim, in the same system that you guys grew up in. So it is really important that we shine a light on this. And then also how you were both saying, for survivors who have gotten out of this, as you two have, the journey's not easy to recover, to heal, but it's possible. And there are books like Kathy O'Brien's book, PTSD Time to Heal, that you both referenced. There are survivors like both of you who people can reach out to. Lynne has amazing support. She has products that she offers. Juliette has her books that share her personal experiences and how she overcame them, and then the amazing work that she has done ever since. It's incredible to see what you both have done. Lynne's an award-winning HR professional, how she was saying. So it's really incredible just to see, how these changes we can help heal the world, and it starts with all of us getting out of that fear that they want us in. They do it to everybody, and we can do that by changing our lifestyles, turning off the TV, getting close to community, people that think like-minded, supporting ways that we can learn about this through books and other channels like healing through Lynn's services. She works directly with people. And so I wanted to give you both an opportunity just to share where people can find you and about your services, products, books. That way people can connect and we can start getting the ball rolling on this whole MK Ultra society that they've put us in micro and macro ways.
Well, you can find me on my website, which is just Google my name. It's julietteengel.com. And there we go. And you'll find my books. And we didn't even get to the time 20 years I spent in Russia. But Sparky is describes my life growing up inside the MK Ultra program. And I tried to stay absolutely true to myself as a child, as a magical thinker, and what it was like to be programmed and to fight against that programming. Angels Over Moscow is about the 20 years I spent in Russia organizing a trafficking underground railroad that rescued trafficking victims from former Soviet Union, North Africa, Asia, and Europe, and built rehabilitation centers around the former Soviet Union. And Moscow Traffic is about the growth of organized crime in Russia, which I ran into a lot. So please read those books. You'll learn a lot about a lot of things.
And Juliette's also on X if you guys wanted to follow her there at Engel Juliette MD. And Lynn is also on X as well if you guys are on there at Lynn S. Haggerman. So I want to plug you guys on there too, and then I'll let Lynn talk about her podcast and her website.
Thank you. That's marvelous. So with before I was activated by God in January of last year to start speaking, he gave me the plan that's in this website for 2 or 3 years. And this is the aftercare of children who have been rescued from above and below ground trafficking at QGRIT.org. And then it's also God's plan to help adults heal from any type of trauma, because trauma is trauma. And before I spoke for the first time on a podcast and gave my testimony, I created this website. So this is everything that God's told me to put in here and what he wants. And that phrase, I want my people healed, in 2020, out of the blue, I heard the audible voice of God, and he sounded like a commander in chief. And that's exactly how he said it. I want my people healed, just like that. And he told me to look into non-invasive healing modalities. I never said all those words together in the same sentence. So I had to research what on earth that was. And he led me to all kinds of products, including light therapy, frequency therapy, herbs, organic foods, and led me ultimately to the #1 product that I recommend, which is LifeWave. And LifeWave is a frequency and light therapy. There are no drugs or chemicals in it. And what it does is we have products that when used together, it enhances and activates stem cells. And stem cells are what made us, and that's our repair mechanism. And by the time we're 30 years old, most of them don't work. By the time we're 60, none of them work. And that's why our bodies deteriorate until we're gone. And we were not meant to just live to 70 or 80 years old. We were meant to live way beyond that, healthy, strong lives. So I have been with the audience listening with trauma backgrounds. I mean, I've had lots of physical things completely fixed, but those with trauma backgrounds, I find that the X39 and the Eon patch together significantly decreased. Well, it decreased my PTSD and anxiety by 70% within the first month. And I can't give any guarantees, but I will say that so far 100% of people who've reached out to me who started on this technology do have relief in their PTSD and anxiety, as well as other physical problems that they're having, because we were not meant to live these lives that we're living. We were meant to be happy and satisfied and successful and full of life and vitality, which is why I call this the wearable med bed, because that's exactly what it is. So this is what the Lord finally, I netted on as the number one thing that he wanted me to offer, because he told me if I would use it and share it and offer it to other people, that he would bless me and them. And that's exactly what he's done.
And Lynn also has a podcast. She's on YouTube as well. I'm showing her Rumble
Yeah.
page, but she has her own podcast, The Lynn Scott Haggerman Show. And then the Patriot Prayer podcast, she is also co-hosting and has her own segment there as well.
Yes, that's been exciting. So I have my Rumble channel, my YouTube channel, where I post every channel on YouTube that's on my Rumble, as long as it won't get me kicked off.
Yeah.
And then the Patriots Prayer Network, they have a reach of 1.5 million people across all their social media platforms. And they asked me about 3 months ago to come on and do podcasts and do as many as I possibly could. So I do 4 a week now, and I'll be doing 5 and possibly more. And I'm also on X and Truth Social. But yeah, God has me very, very busy. And he wants the truth out. And that's the guests that I have. I have guests on who are survivors and whistleblowers and who have messages for us about things that are happening. A lot of current events are on there, and then a lot of supernatural. When God leads me to give, I did a recent podcast on how to bind these demons. I've done shows on all the angels, so all kinds of variety, actually.
So awesome seeing everything that you guys are doing and all the outreach. You're not only carrying your own story and healing from your own trauma every day and growing, but you're taking on the stories of others. You're helping amplify them. You're creating and digging into your story more and creating things like books and sharing it on podcasts, which I'm sure can be very triggering and traumatizing. And it's just really heroic how you've both put yourself out there so much and are willing to do all this work for the sake of helping other people, whether it's a survivor that got free or bringing awareness to the victims that are still enslaved. So I'm just really honored to know both of you. I'm so grateful for all the work that you've done. I encourage people to please go support you guys on all of your channels and platforms, and to get LifeWaved, to buy Juliette's books, to just support them in any way that you can. And I just want to thank you both for coming on today and shedding a light on these really important topics that society can sometimes just really overlook because they're so burdened with the repetition of the news and with propaganda. They can't see beyond that. So is there anything else that you guys wanted to close with or say today that we didn't get to?
I want to say thank you, Emma, and I do have to go because I have to get on another podcast. But your people should go through your incredible library of broadcasts, huge value there, and a complete education. Every time I go on Emma's website, I learn a tremendous amount, and it's a library that will continue into the future of just immeasurable value. So thank you, Emma, and I do have to go.
Absolutely.
Bye, Lynn.
Bye, bye. I agree. God bless you, Emma.
God bless you guys. And was there anything that you wanted to close with as well?
I would just like to give people hope. I love to give people hope. And when you hear my story and Juliette's story, I hope people see that if we can do it, you can too. And it just takes a step at a time. And I encourage everyone to look at all three of our websites and all of our information, because it's jam-packed, and see what resonates with you, and just take one step at a time, and everything's going to be fine.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. And we're so lucky that we have these channels now. I'm sure decades ago this was really hard to find. We didn't have internet access like we have now. We didn't have tons of books out, so it's really great that there are so many ways now that we can learn what these things are. We can learn how to overcome it. We can connect with each other, and pioneers like you are really making that possible. And I'm just so proud of you, Lynn. It's amazing watching your journey. It's amazing watching you blossom both in your professional career and that you're able to do this and, be supported in both ways. It's just really incredible. You're paving the way for people and survivors who, in all walks of life, you're paving the way for them to be able to speak out. You're showing that a businesswoman can also be an advocate and can share their story and still work full time and not be condemned for it. It's a really beautiful time that we're in, that we can have these choices now, and that we can all come together and speak out. And your life wave, I've heard amazing things about. I'm so happy that you're getting more and more people that are finding you through that. And so if you guys missed Lynn's last episode, we did a real deep dive into LifeWave. Please go watch that. I think it could be a really invaluable tool for a lot of you who maybe are struggling with finding results or making progress in whatever it is that you're doing. This could be a really great addition to whatever you're doing. And I've heard great things. I haven't got to try it myself yet. I would really love to and hope to soon. But we're hearing really great things on our end from it. So I would love if you guys would go check it out, share it if it's not something that you can do or not something that you need. Maybe you know somebody that could use it. So check out that deep dive that we did, dig into Juliette's and Lynn's past episodes. And just thank you again for Lynn for coming on. It's just an honor to have you.
Oh, you're welcome. It's an honor to be here. I just consider you a really good friend, and it just blesses me every time we get together, both our pre-show chats and in between and our actual shows together. It's just all wonderful and amazing. What a time to be alive.
I know, it's invigorating. You ladies give me energy and give me hope and courage. So I'm just, I'm just really thrilled to get to do this and that we can all come together in this time and share the way that we are. It's so empowering. And I see in the comments, and I'm sure you get tons of emails, it makes a difference, even if it's just for one person. Like, we're changing lives one person at a time. And
Yeah.
more and more people are believing this. They're not shunning it. More and more podcasters are opening up their platform to talk about this on different levels. We're seeing it slowly creep into crevices of society that it wasn't allowed to be before, and people are finally opening up their minds to this being something that exists in this world with us. And, it's because people like you who had the courage to go first and to start talking about it. So I really encourage everybody listening to support these ladies. Go subscribe to Lynn's podcast, both on YouTube, Rumble. Go check out LifeWave. Her website is just a great resource in general. If you're somebody like me that is really hungry to learn, she has a whole resource page on there. Juliette's books are an incredible, incredible resource for just seeing the lifespan of MK Ultra, as well as overcoming it and the things that you can accomplish, through healing, that you don't have to stay a victim. Her last podcast, From Survivor to Badass, that's exactly what it is, and we're all looking to be badasses right now. So I really
Yeah.
encourage you guys on the other end to please go support these ladies. I'll have all their information in the show notes. The MK Ultra docs that Juliette referenced will also be down there. I'll have all my contact information. Feel free to reach out anytime. And we couldn't do this without you guys. Thank you so much for all the love and support that you pour into all of these incredible warriors and heroes that come on here. And just know how valued you are, and that this doesn't exist without you, that your role is so important in this. So you guys, thank you so much for listening. God bless you all, and we will see you next time.